Okay, let's talk about 1857. A single rumor about a greased refill cartridge ignited a fire that swept across an entire subcontinent. This one event would bring down a massive company, begin the direct rule of an empire, and completely change the course of Indian history. It's often called a watershed moment, and in this explainer, we're going to unpack exactly why.
So, what does it take to push a soldier to that point? For the generations of Indian soldiers serving the British East India Company, it was a whole mix of things: low pay, constant discrimination, and having to watch their own country get conquered bit by bit. But in 1857, the final push, the thing that tipped it all over the edge, was something much, much smaller.
Believe it or not, it all came down to a rumor about a piece of military gear, a whisper that would soon become a roar, setting an entire subcontinent on fire.
So how on earth does a simple rumor do that? How does it ignite a massive revolt? Well, it all started when brand new military technology collided head-on with ancient, deeply held faith.
Right, so here's the deal. The British introduced this new Enfield rifle. Now to load it, the soldiers, who were called sepoys, had to bite open a paper cartridge. Sounds simple enough. The problem, the rumors spreading like wildfire, was that these cartridges were greased with pig and cow fat. Now you gotta understand, for Hindu sepoys, the cow is sacred. For Muslim sepoys, the pig is unclean. Forcing them to put that in their mouths wasn't just an order they disliked. It felt like a direct attack on their religion, their culture, their very soul. It was the final insult.
And things escalated fast. I mean, really fast. In February, it started with some soldiers just refusing to use the new cartridges. By March, one sepoy, Mangal Pandey, actually attacks his officers. But then, on May 10th, it just explodes into a full-blown mutiny in the town of Meerut. What happened was, 85 soldiers there were publicly humiliated for refusing the cartridges. Their comrades just snapped. They stormed the prison, freed their friends, and started marching on the capital, Delhi.
But here's the thing. A fire this big never starts from just one spark. The greased cartridge? That was the match. The fuel? Well, that had been piling up for 100 years.
The anger was everywhere, in every part of society. Politically, you had princes losing their kingdoms. Economically, farmers were being crushed by impossible taxes, while local craftsmen were ruined by British goods. Socially, new laws and Christian missionaries made many people feel their entire way of life was under threat. And we already know how the sepoys felt: disrespected, underpaid, and humiliated. From the palace to the farm, everybody had a reason to be angry. So when those mutineers from Meerut marched into the old capital city of Delhi, everything changed. This was no longer just a soldier's protest. It was becoming a massive, popular uprising. Once in Delhi, they did something incredibly strategic. They went to the 82-year-old Mughal emperor, Bahadur Shah Zafar, and declared him their leader. Now, he was old and didn't have much real power, but his name gave the rebellion something priceless: legitimacy. He was a symbol of the pre-British era, a figure who could unite all these different groups under a single banner. And soon, leaders started popping up all over. In Kanpur, a man named Nana Sahib took charge. He had a personal score to settle with the British. They'd cut off his father's pension and title. For him, this revolt was a chance to win back his honor and his inheritance.
Meanwhile, in Lucknow, the capital of Awadh, the resistance was led by a powerful woman, Begum Hazrat Mahal. The British had recently taken over her kingdom, leaving tens of thousands of local soldiers who came from that region totally enraged and unemployed. She fought fiercely to have her young son recognized as the rightful ruler.
And of course, in Jhansi, you have the iconic Rani Lakshmibai. When the British tried to annex her kingdom, she famously vowed, "I will not give up my Jhansi." She grabbed a sword and became one of the most brilliant and celebrated warriors of the entire rebellion. What's so incredible is that this wasn't just a revolt led by princes and queens. The leadership came from all walks of life. In Bihar, you had an 80-year-old landlord leading the charge. In Faizabad, it was a religious leader. And get this, in Bagbat, a regular villager named Shah Mal organized 84 villages into a network that seriously messed with British supply lines. This had truly become a people's war. For a few hot months in 1857, it honestly looked like British rule in India might just collapse. But despite all the fire and courage, the rebellion was ultimately crushed. So, let's figure out why. In the end, it was a total mismatch. The Indian rebels were incredibly brave, no question, but they had no unified command. Different leaders were fighting for their own local territories. There was no single grand strategy. The British, on the other hand, were a coordinated, modern military machine. They had experienced generals, a unified plan, and a game-changing piece of tech, the telegraph. They could communicate instantly across vast distances, which allowed them to outmaneuver the fragmented rebel forces time and time again.
Another huge factor was that this rebellion wasn't an all-India movement, not even close. It was mainly concentrated in North and Central India. Huge regions like the South and the Punjab stayed out of it. And what's more, some of India's most powerful princes actually helped the British. The Governor-General later called them breakwaters in the storm because they helped stop the rebellion from spreading.
And the British response was just overwhelming and ruthless. Delhi, the heart of the rebellion, fell in just 4 months, and the suppression was horrific. It involved massacres and public executions on a scale designed not just to win, but to terrorize the entire population into never trying anything like this again.
Okay, so the revolt was crushed. So why on earth do we call it a watershed? If they lost, how could it be a turning point? Because it was a point of no return. After 1857, the way the British ruled India was changed forever.
Think about it, with that mountain analogy. Before 1857, the river of history is flowing in one direction, with the East India Company in charge. The revolt of 1857 is like a massive earthquake that changes the whole landscape. After it's over, the river of history is forced into a totally new channel. It can never go back to the way it was.
And this reorganization was profound. First, the East India Company was done, abolished. The British government took over. Second, India was now under the direct rule of the British Crown, and Queen Victoria was named Empress of India. Third, the army was completely rebuilt, with a much higher ratio of British to Indian soldiers. And fourth, the British perfected a new strategy for control: divide and rule. You see, one of the things that terrified the British most was the incredible Hindu-Muslim unity they saw during the revolt. A Muslim emperor as the symbolic leader of a rebellion made up of mostly Hindu soldiers, that was their worst nightmare. They decided that this unity was the greatest threat to their empire, and their divide and rule policy was specifically designed to shatter it for good.
But how should we actually remember 1857? The debate is still raging today. Some historians, like R.C. Majumdar, argue that calling it the First National War of Independence is all wrong. He'd say it wasn't national because most of India didn't join in. It wasn't the first because there had been many revolts before, and it wasn't a war of independence because many leaders were just trying to restore their old feudal kingdoms, not create a new modern nation. But on the other hand, you have Indian nationalists like V.D. Savarkar. He was the one who famously called it the First War of National Independence. For him, and for many who came after, this was the foundational struggle. It was the first time Indians had fought together on such a massive scale against a foreign power, planting the seeds of a national identity that would eventually blossom into freedom 90 years later. So, what was it? A failed mutiny? The last gasp of a dying feudal order? Or was it the violent, bloody birth of Indian nationalism? The truth is, it's complicated. And that very question is why the legacy of 1857 is still so powerful and continues to shape how India understands its past and itself to this very day.